everyone, and welcome to our pre-debate show edition of the 99. I'm Brianna Gray, National Press Secretary, and I'm joined once again by my colleagues.
Hello.
Bill Neidhart.
We are back.
It is great to be back.
Yeah.
Second presidential debate coming up in an hour.
Okay. So why is it so great? What are you looking forward to tonight? What are you hoping to see, Josh?
Well, first of all, I just want to welcome everyone in. Thanks for joining us tonight. We've got the debate coming up in an hour. It's a 2-hour debate live on CNN. We want to hear from you. Ask your questions, your comments. We're going to be taking comments and questions throughout the show. You're an important part of this because this is a conversation with you. It's not just us talking at you.
Right.
But the second part of that is, too, on this campaign, we rely on your contributions for support. So if you can help us out tonight, you support Bernie while he's on stage tonight. Go to live.berniesanders.com. Give us a donation, $3, $5, whatever you can. Your name will appear at the bottom of the screen. We really appreciate it. We're going to be tracking donations tonight and let you know where we are at the end of the night.
Overall, the whole campaign, we're at over 2 million contributions, which is a record for us.
We're going for 1 million donors. We're coming up on that goal. It's huge. I mean,
especially
really,
at this
really
point,
big moment.
At this point in the race. And 2 million donations is nearly twice as many as the next largest donation amount. And that's really reflective of the extent to which this is a movement. This is not a campaign that's fueled by big dollar donations or a handful of people who managed to raise $24 million in the second quarter. Who knows who I'm talking about? We're not naming names. When we have an agenda, when we have platform preferences, it's because our agenda is directly driven by people like you. So please help us.
Brianna, that takes me to what I'm looking for tonight.
Okay, what's that?
Because I went on a trip this weekend.
Oh, yeah, you did?
With Bernie Sanders. We went to Canada. I was in Detroit, and we went right over the border to Windsor, Canada. It's about a 10-minute drive. It takes a little bit longer getting through customs and border, but we went with 13 people with diabetes. And these are people who are struggling to afford their insulin. They're paying sometimes $340 for a vial of insulin, spending thousands and thousands of dollars a year. And we heard stories from people who had been to the emergency room 74 times in a span of a few months because they were rationing insulin. We heard from people who had to decide between paying their electricity bill and buying insulin for their kids. We heard from a college football player who had to ration his insulin because he felt guilty about the burden he was putting on his family because of the cost to them. And so Bernie Sanders took these people, we took them over the border.
Right.
And one of this family, the football player, they saved $10,000 on this trip. But what's amazing to me, and what it says to me about Bernie and about this movement that we're building is that here's a guy who really understands the urgency of the crisis that we face. He's not waiting around. He's not saying, okay, yes, he's proposing bold transformational changes. He's willing to take on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry. He understands what is required to make life a little bit easier for people in this country. But he's also saying, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, this wasn't his first trip to the northern border,
That's
was
right.
it?
No, it
when
wasn't.
When did he first go, Josh?
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to be looking for tonight was, I think on the stage tonight, what you're going to be seeing from different folks is, their plans, what they have to do. What you're going to see from Bernie is a consistency that no one else can match. And to just, connect what you hope to see tonight, right? Talking about that trip to Canada. 20 years ago, in 1999, where was Bernie Sanders? What was he doing? He was taking a bus of women battling breast cancer to go over the border into Canada for a drug that was 1/10 the price of what they were paying in America. Right now, insulin, 1/10 the price in Canada of compared to what it is in America. So, what I'm talking about here is not just, consistency. It is a consistent record from Bernie Sanders of not only what he stands for, but how he gets it done, right? And no one else can touch that.
So in my eyes, the consistency is not just a talking point. What it says is you can count on Bernie Sanders to actually follow through on this agenda when he's in office. And unfortunately, and this is something that I'm looking for tonight, what we've seen already as is that even though almost every candidate on the stage, if not all of them, have said that they support Medicare for all, and the punditry leading up to the last debate was all about, well, how is Bernie going to distinguish himself in a field where everyone's already aped his 2016 platform? What's the point of voting for Bernie Sanders if everyone else is identical? Well, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is all of the cracks have spread into chasms. And the extent to which people have really misrepresented their commitment to Medicare for all and Medicare and healthcare as a human right has come to the fore. So just this past week or so, we saw Joe Biden's plan kind of very openly reject Medicare for all. He was not one who had pretended, even in the first instance, to believe in healthcare as a later. So we'll come back to you a little bit later, Bill. But also, of course, Kamala Harris, over the course of the past few days, has put out her plan, which shows that even though that she uses the rhetoric and says healthcare is a human right, at the end of the day, if you are putting people in a position to be potentially not able to afford life-saving or life-sustaining care, then in fact you don't support healthcare as a human right. And what we see in her plan is it's two main problems. One is that she goes out of her way to preserve a role for the private insurance industry with Medicare Advantage, which we've seen has extraordinary levels of waste, including $30 billion over the last few years. And perhaps even more significantly, hers is a plan that would roll out over 10 years. So if she's lucky enough to have one term, it wouldn't be finished. Two terms, it wouldn't be completed. She's relying and hoping that there is going to be a sympathetic president to follow her 2 terms that can carry this to pass. And if Barack Obama's ACA, if Obamacare had this kind of a rollout deadline, it would have halfway through Trump's first term, he would have dismantled it, and 20 million people wouldn't have been taken off of uninsurance.
6 years after the ACA was passed, right? So, I mean, that gives you an idea of what a 10-year window really looks like.
It's just not a problem.
And let me jump in here for a second. If you have questions about Medicare for all, have you heard about the Kamala's plan this week and you're a little bit confused about what she's talking about? I know I was.
Yep, I am.
Put it in the comments. Put it in the chat. We want to hear from you. Join this conversation right now.
Yeah, this is one of 2 nights of a debate, right?
So they're both on the second night. They won't be on stage with Bernie tonight. But there will be some people that disagree with Bernie tonight, right? We'll have Pete Buttigieg on stage, who's not a supporter of Medicare for all. Yeah. We'll have Beto O'Rourke, who's also not a supporter of Medicare for all. I think there's going to be some clear contrast tonight between Bernie and pretty much everyone else on that stage in terms of their record of support for Medicare for all and where they want to see this country go.
So one of the questions that I've gotten when talking to reporters over the last couple of days is about Bernie's voter base. I've been asked repeatedly, this is one of the sexiest mythologies that's out there right now, does Bernie Sanders have a ceiling? What do you guys say to that? This idea that somehow, even though he's the most, has the highest favorable ratings of anyone in this race.
99% name recognition. Right. I mean, there's a ceiling with that. He can only get 1 percentage point more.
But they know who he is, and they like him, and in fact, of course, he's the number 2 seed in this race. What do you make of this question, and why do you think people keep banding it about?
Well, look, first of all, I think a lot of people that you see on CNN and MSNBC are part of the establishment. They are part of a different class. They are not people who have supported Bernie, and they probably never will. And so they have an interest in pushing this narrative that there is a cap on his support and that he could never, ever win.
So for those of you who are curious about this kind of media bias conversation, this morning actually we released one of my all-time favorite episodes of our podcast, Hear the Burn, where we take on media bias with Katie Halper, who's a leftist writer and podcast producer herself, and a comedian, and also Sam Cedar, who is a host of The Majority Report and also used to be a co-host of Air America. So he's been in this game a long time. He's also an MSNBC correspondent who can talk firsthand about what it's like and the different incentives that are going on at these institutions. So please tune into that as well.
Let's get back to this question, because I think that we have seen, we've seen it in the polling, that when people hear Bernie Sanders' message of taking on a rigged economy that is held in place by the power of the billionaire class, the power of large corporations that have stranglehold on our democracy at the moment because of Citizens United, because of the influx of cash big money into our politics. When they hear that message and they hear what he is going to do to change their lives, to make it a little bit easier to get health care, to make it a little bit easier to afford your prescription drugs, to give you a little bit more money in your pocket because the minimum wage is a little bit higher. When they hear that message delivered from Bernie Sanders, which is one I think you will hear tonight,
yes,
they're voting for him. And we're building a working class movement. This is not a movement that is going to rely, he's not going to win at the end of the day because he convinced the contributor on MSNBC who's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to vote for him. He's going to win when working people band together to demand change.
And that's why, I mean, if you're watching this on live.berniesanders.com, you can actually contribute right now. You can become one of the over 2 million contributions that have been made already for this campaign. That's part of it, right?
Yes.
Those are the people that are giving to Bernie and giving us a platform to reach out to more people. But they're also not, I don't know, someone paid 6 figures to talk on TV.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what's really funny, what was kind of galling to me is that I was watching Chuck Rocha, who's one of our campaign advisors, and Pete Buttigieg's
Surrogate. She was like a top surrogate.
Yeah. Have a conversation on the Hill TV, I believe it was yesterday. And in the course of their back and forth, advancing the respective, platforms of their candidates, the Buttigieg surrogate said something that I thought was really shocking. She says, I don't think voters actually care about who's contributing money to the campaigns. She says, that's not something that I've heard on the campaign trail. Which I find really interesting because, especially in my capacity as a reporter, when I used to travel around and strike up conversations with folks in different parts of the country that were, ideologically opposed to me, or I presume they would be, that is the number one thing they raised with me, and why they often had a foundational respect for Bernie Sanders as a candidate, even if they disagreed with some of his policy platforms. They said, at the end of the day, I know that he's fair and he's advancing these policies because it's what he genuinely believes what will help America and Americans, even if I disagree with his approach.
This takes me to an important point, and Paul Bobich touches on this. He says on Facebook, discuss your recent trip to Canada and your vision to ensure life-saving drugs are affordably available for all Americans. So let's talk about the last part of that. And I think it connects to Brianna's point, which is that Bernie Sanders, since the last debate, has taken a pledge, a very important pledge.
Yes.
And not many other candidates on this stage have taken that pledge.
No,
and what that
most
pledge
of them
said is he will not take any money from the executives at pharmaceutical industry or in the health insurance industry. And it's important, and it gets back to this point, which is that if you're going to create change, you can't take money from the industries that have an interest in maintaining the status quo. It just seems basic. It makes sense to a lot of people. And I think what you're going to see tonight, to Paul's point, is Bernie Sanders saying, I have taken that pledge. I will fix a corrupt system by not taking their money. Will you do the same?
Yeah, can we pull up actually who has and who hasn't taken that pledge? Because I think it's
I think it's a very short list.
It's Warren and Bernie. I mean, Bernie made up the pledge. Warren said she'd sign on. Notably, Kamala Harris didn't, and then released what she considers a Medicare for All plan. Unfortunately, it's not Medicare for All, so it's not a Medicare for All plan.
It's not much of a plan either.
Yeah, and the rest of the stage that you're going to see tonight, you're going to see people who haven't taken this pledge. You're also going to see people who have executives on their team as senior advisors.
Yep.
You're going to see people who were once healthcare executives themselves. So, it really shows a stark contrast. Bernie lays it down and says, this is the pledge. I'm not taking their money.
Yeah.
I'm going to rely on people at live.berniesanders.com who are giving and everything like that. Not these wealthy,
and then we got another question here from Daniel. And Daniel says, Bernie should make the argument about why private insurance is immoral because it reinforces inequality in healthcare. A person's life shouldn't be a case to promote someone else's status.
Go ahead, Bill. Go. I was just going to say, the simplest thing for me, when this all really clicked for me, when I was working in the Senate, when Medicare for All, this Senator Bernie Sanders, I was in a different office, and this Senator Bernie Sanders, he's introducing this bill. And what is this about? When it clicked for me is when I thought, wait, we are putting profit ahead of healthcare. That's the whole, you'll hear Bernie talk about this a lot. The whole purpose of United Healthcare is to find a way to wring out money from the healthcare process, generate profits, to generate, what was it, $20 million that the CEO of United Healthcare made last year?
Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Michigan.
Okay, yeah, which is located
like-
across the
You
street.
should see it from, yep.
Across the street
This
from
is a
where
non-profit.
it's wild. I mean, that's where it really boils down to me.
And I do think Bernie's been making the moral case. I do think that when you say healthcare is a human right, we can't let that get bastardized by everyone who's adopted it when they still are going out of their way to protect the private health insurance industry. If you truly believe that healthcare is in fact a human right, then whether or not you were born poor should have no bearing on whether or not you're able to survive a threat to your existence. It's that simple. There's no equivocating on this. And frankly, I agree. We should start calling out people who say the lingo, who say things about respecting human life and dignity, and then want to put a price tag on it.
Well, Bill, you're going to break down Joe Biden's comments recently on Medicare for All.
Let's do that,
because
actually.
Let me just put it in context. Joe Biden has been talking a lot about Medicare for All recently. He recently came out with a plan that's a public option. And he's also been lying a lot about Bernie Sanders' proposal.
Quite a bit.
And I think that you're going to hear a lot of those same lies, which are echoes of the pharmaceutical industry and the health insurance industry, from other people that are going to be on this stage tonight. We know Joe won't be, but other people will, who are going to be trumpeting the same lies. So, Bill, take a second to break down what he's been saying and why it's not true.
So, over the past couple of days, I did some work. I kind of did a deep dive into how Joe Biden talks about Medicare for All and the lies that he tells. And I kind of broke it down into 4 main categories for what Joe Biden's lies look like. And, I think there's kind of a trend that I was seeing repeatedly. He really goes through, and here they are up on the screen, Joe Biden's 4 big lies about Medicare for All. Let's run through them. Let me get myself here. Delicious. Lie number 1.
That's a seltzer.
That's a seltzer. Joe Biden, Medicare for All, lie number 1. The Medicare is gone lie.
Yeah.
You might be familiar with this one because, I don't know, it was first propagated by Donald Trump. So the fact you right now have Joe Biden repeating Republican Donald Trump talking points to defeat Medicare for All. You know what he said? He was at a AARP in Iowa. It was a room full of retired Americans. He told them, quote, all of the Medicare you have is gone if we pass Medicare for All.
Yeah, it's gone in the way that if you give someone $1 million, their poverty is gone.
All the Medicare you have is gone is a lie. It's a pants on fire lie. It doesn't make any sense. Medicare for All means Medicare for all. It's kind of in the title. And this is, I think, it's the most widely debunked lie that Joe Biden's been telling. It's also, let's go through the other 3 that are left, but it's the most hysterical.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
You have to keep from crying.
Yeah. All right. So on to lie number 2, the repeal smear. This one also gets me going because I was on Capitol Hill when we all fought to stop the Republican repeal effort, right? Across the country, millions of people stood up, spoke out, and, with that one vote, with John McCain's vote, we were able to stop that repeal effort. To be clear, it's still happening in the courts, right? They got rid of the individual mandate. They are trying to repeal it fully in the courts. But here's Joe Biden trying to slander Medicare for All. He said, quote, I knew Republicans would do everything in their power to repeal Obamacare. And then he goes on, I'm surprised that so many Democrats are running on getting rid of it too. That is ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, that is comparing Democrats championing Medicare for all to Republicans who are hell-bent on taking health care away from millions of people. It shows just how dishonest Joe Biden's willing to get on this.
Another part of that, right, is the kind of hiding, using Obama's laudable legacy as kind of a shield and a sword. Yeah. And I would be remiss not to say that there is this kind of racial appeal aspect to it as well, knowing how popular Barack Obama is, rightly so, with the Black community, to try to say that somehow was trying to attack his legacy as a way to disguise the fact that he's willing to keep disproportionately Black and brown people uninsured in order to preserve a system that preserves profits for the private insurance industry. Again, this isn't about personal attacks, but when you're talking about people's lives, it is personal, and it's craven.
I mean, look at the numbers. the Republican repeal plan would have left 60 million people uninsured. Joe Biden's plan would leave over 10 million people uninsured. Medicare for All leaves no one uninsured. So you tell me which one's closer to the Obamacare repeal that he's bandying about. All right, on to the next Joe Biden Medicare for All lie. Lie number 3, the hiatus fabrication. This is one that he's really been leaning into lately. I actually, the first lie was from a Donald Trump talking point. I don't know where this one comes from. It certainly doesn't come from reality. The other day he said, every second counts. It's not about a year. It's about the day, the week, the month, the next 6 months. It's about hope. And if you have these hiatuses, it may, and he trailed off. Now his campaign team went out and they said, oh, that's not what we meant by a hiatus. Let me tell you what he's trying to say here. He's trying to say that the 4-year transition period for Medicare for All would mean that people go without health care.
This one really gets me.
That just doesn't make sense. First of all, Obamacare had a 4-year transition period, and that seemed to work, and we got that done. But giving people a public option immediately and also preparing the entire population to get on Medicare within 4 years, there is no hiatus of care.
There's no hiatus. And in fact, to be really clear, the way that Bernie Sanders' transition actually works, or the way the Medicare from Care for All transition works, is that in the first year, the age of people who are receiving Medicare, which is currently 65, drops to 55. And in addition, everyone under 18, all children, are covered. That's in the first year. And the second year, the age drops another 10 years to 45, then 35, then everybody's covered. So the idea that somehow we're characterizing a massive expansion of people who are receiving Medicare, free point-of-service care insurance, and I just really want to clarify what this means, because in America, in this country, we don't have any familiarity with what it feels like to walk into a hospital, get treated without checking your bank account first, not having to sign 1.5 million forms, and just walking out no matter how wealthy you are or what's wrong with you. Free point-at-service care for everyone is being characterized. No copays, no deductibles, no premiums. Is being characterized by Joe Biden as somehow a step backward.
Yeah, to finish the point on the hiatus fabrication for Joe Biden, I recommend that his team take up the Medicare for All bill. You can open it up, go to subtitle C of Title 10 in the Medicare for All bill, and you will find, quote, requires patients are protected from disruptions in their care during the transition period, end of quote. There's no hiatus. It's right there in the bill. If only he read it. Yeah. The final, number 4, Joe Biden Medicare for All lie is the bankrupt hospitals myth. Now, this one's really relevant tonight because the Pants on Fire PolitiFact that I found when I was looking into this is actually from John Delaney, who will be on stage tonight. But let's go back to Joe Biden. He's leading in the polls. Let's talk about how he's lying about Medicare for All. He said, quote, the problem with Medicare for All is that it would bankrupt hospitals. He goes on, it threatens rural hospitals. This has been soundly debunked, right? When John Delaney told this lie, debunked. Medicare for All significantly increases the reimbursements that hospitals get. That's what Joe Biden is trying to play a game. Oh, the Medicare reimbursement rates are lower. Actually, these rural hospitals are dealing with 2 really big critical factors. One, uninsurance or underinsurance. In Medicare for All, you don't have that. Everyone's fully insured. So you get rid of that issue, and all of a sudden there's a lot less. In fact, there's no uncompensated care that these hospitals have to deal with. And then Medicare reimbursement rates are actually higher than Medicaid reimbursement rates, which is what a lot of these rural hospitals that are facing challenges are going through right now. You'll see that map that was put out today that was kind of making the rounds on Twitter. The states that didn't expand Medicaid had a lot of hospital closures. Yeah. The same's true as if you have Medicare, you actually increase that reimbursement rate. We can save hospitals with Medicare for All. I think what he needs to ask himself, Joe Biden, is it worth putting profit ahead of these hospitals and the people that they care for? Yeah. Because that's what your plan still does.
Yeah. That point is particularly salient given what just happened last week. For those of you who watched the 99, you know that members of this campaign and then Bernie Sanders also the following day went out to try to protest the closure of Hahnemann Hospital, which is a hospital in Philadelphia which serves predominantly low-income low-income community, predominantly people who are on Medicaid. 50% of patients there are on Medicaid, and they're 2/3 Black and brown. This is a hospital that was bought by a venture capitalist, basically for the real estate value. He sunk the hospital and is now selling it off to build condos on it. But he's able to justify it in some ways by saying that the hospital isn't making enough money, largely because it is disproportionately serving people who are on Medicaid. So it's getting reimbursed through Medicaid payments. Having Medicare for all, patients being reimbursed fully through Medicare instead of Medicaid is something that would help support hospitals like that. And moreover, Bernie Sanders, I think, just doesn't get enough credit for his community health center work, where he has secured $11 billion of funding for community health centers across this country. These are both disproportionately in urban and very rural areas, but places where they don't have enough hospitals to meet the needs of the population, oftentimes because the populations are too spread out when it comes to rural environments, or places like Philadelphia, where there's just not enough to meet the need, the concentrated need. And he worked on this with Representative Clyburn, correct?
Yes.
Because they both represent very different communities, but that have a very much of a shared need. So the idea that Bernie Sanders and the Medicare for All agenda and the community health center agenda are not disproportionately serving this overwhelming need, that Joe Biden is, again, castigating this plan as somehow counterintuitive to the needs of the American people. It's pretty gross.
And so those are, that's Joe Biden's lies. We kind of broke those down. Now, Medicare for all, healthcare in general, I think a lot of people have questions, so we want to hear them. Be sure to get into the comments, whether you're watching this on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, or live.berniesanders.com. Leave us a comment if you have some questions about what this healthcare debate is going to look like tonight.
We've got a question, we got a comment actually from NZY Manic. Says, everyone go donate $3 to Bernie. Every dollar helps. Do it now. Feel the burn.
Hell yeah.
Thank you.
That's right.
So we've got some big time surrogates down in or up in Detroit. I don't know, down, up, where we are right now. We got some big time surrogates in Detroit, and one of those surrogates is Senator Nina Turner. That's right. And she has a message for everybody. She wanted us to share. So let's cue that up right here. Let's hear from Nina.
Hello, fam. It's yours truly, S&T, Senator Nina Turner here. And here in Detroit, oh my God, our senator is going to take that stage here shortly. And he is going to talk to this country about his vision, his passion, and his compassion for our country. As we all know, he has been consistent in his stance for the working class and barely middle class people of this country. And that is going to be on display yet again on the debate stage. But as we know, our senator, he is more substance than soundbite, but he's going to bring it. And so we are excited about where we can go from here with the leadership of our senator. As he always says, it's not about me, this is about us. And this journey really is about us. So when he stands boldly for Medicare for all and not that half measure stuff that other folks are talking about, that's real. When he talks about college for all, just ensuring that parents can look into the eyes of their children, or grandparents look into the eyes of their grandchildren and declare to them that if you go to school and do the right thing, you too could go to college or go to a trade school. When he talks about increasing teachers' pay, because it is a sin and a shame in this country that teachers do not make a living wage, and far too many teachers find themselves working 2 jobs or providing supplies for their students in school. Or just the fact that the everyday people of this country deserve better than what they are getting. They deserve to live a good life, that the system is rigged. It's been rigged for quite some time. And that conscious-minded people on the move can unrig the system with a leader like Senator Bernard Sanders. I am so excited. I'm about to burst. So been here since Sunday, had the opportunity to travel to Flint, Michigan with the lethal weapon himself, Brother Danny Glover, to talk to some families about their struggle. It's been almost 6 years, and our sisters and brothers in Flint are still struggling. And their struggle represents a canary in a coal mine, things that are happening in places like Denmark, South Carolina, or Ames, Iowa, or even my very own Toledo, Ohio, in my home state. We are all connected, and what we can expect and what we deserve. That's what Senator Bernie Sanders' vision is that the working class people of this country, and that's the most of us, that we deserve some things. We got to have a leader that has that vision to put it forward, and then testing the fortitude not to be bought off by multimillionaires and billionaires whose only special interest is you, baby, and that is Senator Bernard Sanders. So we are going to cheer our senator on tonight.
Hello, I'm Danny Glover, and I'm here to support my candidate for President of the United States, Bernie Sanders, here in Detroit for the debates. But more importantly, I'm here also to talk to community people in Detroit, and also I had an opportunity to go to Flint. Now, Bernie has been to Flint twice, in 2016 and 2017, in support of the citizens in Flint whose water is still dirty, is still undrinkable. We had a chance to visit 2 families who deserve better. And that's why I'm here, supporting my friend and also the next president of the United States, Bernie Sanders, here in Detroit. Thank you.
That's great messages from Danny Glover and Senator Nina Turner. We're going to need their support tonight and for this entire campaign.
Danny's my favorite because he spoke at my high school graduation.
Did he really?
He did.
Yeah. Was there a connection? Did you have a...
No. Well, he does a lot of humanitarian work, and I went to the UN school, so they had like humanitarians come and talk to our graduation. Yeah.
So here's what I want to know: what do you want to see Bernie Sanders do tonight? What are you looking for from him? What's maybe the most important issue to you? What do you care about the most? The policy that you care about the most? Maybe it's a certain message that you want him to deliver tonight. What are you looking for? We're all looking for different things: consistency, his plan to take on the most powerful special interest in this country. We're looking for him to talk about Medicare for all. We're looking for him to talk about that incredible trip that he took this weekend to Canada. But we want to hear from you. Maybe you have different things that you really want to hear. Maybe you're undecided in this election. Maybe you are still waiting to hear from a candidate on a certain issue. What is that thing that you're looking for?
I see someone here, Liam Seven Biznick, saying I want him to take his gloves completely off. And I saw someone earlier say, I want there to be more direct confrontation. And the person earlier was explaining that it's not an attack to do a critique, like to draw a contrast. And I think that's 100% right. You know, I was watching KCDC interview, her interview of Bernie Sanders from before the last debate. And she asked him, you know, are you going to hit the other candidates? Are you going to attack the other candidates? And Bernie Sanders is like, well, I will draw a contrast. She says, well, what about the pledge to play nice? He's like, well, that's different. And she literally said, well, drawing contrast and making an attack is the same thing. Like she said, she literally explicitly drew that equivalence. Obviously, that's ridiculous because, you know, what's the point of punditry? What's the point of these debates if the point isn't to illustrate why someone should be voting for one person or another? I think what people are wanting to force, the position they're wanting to force Bernie Sanders and other candidates into is to make a decision purely based on superficial things or personality. Because without drawing those contrasts, that's what you're left with. You know, you're left with some instinctual sense of, I think it has to be a man to win the president, or I think it has to be this, or they're from a big state. You know, these kinds of things that don't really have a lot of root in reality.
Joe Colon says, I know Bernie is more substance than soundbite, but I hope he brings it tonight and speaks strongly.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. And again, you don't have to criticize the other people on stage in order to make the case for Bernie Sanders, right? He has a message to deliver. I think we're going to hear tonight is what can Bernie Sanders do for the future of this country?
Yeah.
That I think is a message he's going to deliver strongly tonight.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm kind of looking for, which could be a little different from other debates, is we're in Detroit tonight, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're not in Detroit right now. We're in Bernie HQ, but the candidates are going to be in Detroit, and I think what we'll see is a real opportunity to engage with the challenges that are facing Detroit, right? I lived in Milwaukee for a long time. It's a very similar story there. You have a city that was once vibrant. It was once a place where you had, a working class that was the middle class. You had these people making incredible salaries. You had the African American community actually making it, getting by, building wealth over generations, overcoming the systemic challenges that were placed ahead of them. And we saw that all wiped away over decade after decade and decade of Washington going in with these insane policies that just attacked the undergirding of what that city was built on. And tonight you have a chance, and I think we'll see it from Senator Sanders, a chance to say that This government and this economy are broken, and we need some fundamental change.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see some other folks who aren't willing to go that far. And for the folks who live in Detroit, that's just not good enough.
Yeah, what that reminds me of is, the news cycle over the past couple of days has been a lot about these racist tweets from Trump, right?
Yeah.
And the missing part,
Baltimore.
about Baltimore, sorry, and the missing part of that conversation, in large part, at least when it comes to what Trump is saying and why it's wrong, is a discussion about the kind of historical, structural things that happened that caused declines in cities like Baltimore, like Detroit, that were once the powerhouses of this country. My mom is from Cleveland, and she likes to say that when she came to DC for college, she was really shocked to discover that people thought she was from a small town. Because when she was growing up, Cleveland was like literally the 6th biggest city in America, and she was like these kids who were from like Annapolis are like talking about her like she's like some small town girl. So that's to say, like, when we're talking about the Midwest and industrial decline, that's also the story of not just about white America and white working class. It's a story about Black Americans who are often like last hired, first fired. We're talking about redlining in cities like Baltimore that prevented historically Black families from accumulating the same kind of net wealth that white families did. And then to know that those kind of structural factors were at play, and to choose to look down on and kick down on the people in those cities and the leadership of those cities who are trying their best to reform them, often against policies that Trump supports that make it a harder job. It's just it's really disgusting. And for those who might politically be watching this and like not be so comfortable with calling people racist, like I understand that those people are out there, and I would put to you whether or not you would call Donald Trump racist. I mean, I would.
Yeah,
I do.
He is a racist.
Very clearly.
Yeah.
And Bernie's called him out for that.
And he absolutely has. But like, I don't think that you need to even believe that to know that what Donald Trump has done is wrong. Yeah. And that's not what leadership is. And the leaders should be looking for ways to improve and build up a community, and not somehow blaming it and saying that it's somehow less worthy.
Point, because one of the things that Trump tweeted this week, actually this weekend, was that Bernie was somehow racist because he had highlighted the poverty that exists in Baltimore. And just obviously ridiculous. And the comment came from actually when Bernie in 2016 went to Baltimore to walk around with leaders in the community to highlight the unemployment in the community, the lack of health insurance in the community.
It was after Freddie Gray was killed.
It was.
He went there to talk about the systemic factors that led up to the death of Freddie Gray.
And so this is something that you might hear tonight. You might not hear, someone ask Bernie to respond to Donald Trump's tweets, which are totally ridiculous, of course. But it gets to the point, Bernie Sanders stood there, and there's actually a great question in that press conference. Somebody asked him, will you talk about ISIS? And here's Bernie's there, and he says, look, I'll talk to you about ISIS. We'll talk about foreign policy.
Right.
But is anyone going to talk about the poverty that exists in Baltimore? Is anyone going to talk about the unemployment, the lack of jobs, the fact that we have been building more jails and putting more people behind bars while doing nothing to help the communities and solve those underlying problems? When are we going to talk about that as a country? And Bernie Sanders has been talking about that for the last 40 years. Yeah. And it's time for this country to have a reckoning with the poverty that exists and to actually deal with it in a real way, not with more racist tweets from Donald Trump.
Yeah. Speaking of controversial messages, I want to recognize _Jamie, who says, show me a single clip where they acknowledge literally anything posted in the chat. Jamie doesn't think that we're live. Just want to read that back to you.
Call him out.
Jamie, that's how you read it. Like, not Jamie at Hebibo, what have you. We're acknowledging you. I don't want to hear any more complaints on that front.
Yeah, you might have gotten the username wrong there, but that's pretty
close. Sorry,
we got a question from Roger Jimenez 8. Bernie, call on the young who think their vote doesn't matter to join.
Yeah.
I think it's a really important point, because someone also asked, how are you going to get centrists, Democrats, to work with you to enact your policies? And this is, I don't want to be like a broken record, but this is where this movement stuff comes in. It's not just like rhetoric. It's not just like a feel-good thing to say during the campaign that we're all in this together. It's a political strategy to have a mass movement, because what ends up happening is, people, power doesn't concede anything without a demand. What needs to happen is that folks in districts across the country who are who want to keep their seats need to feel like their constituents are going to vote them out if they don't follow the mandate that is Bernie Sanders' election, right? Like, if they need to feel, people in Mitch McConnell's district, people in districts all across the country, regardless if they're red or blue, just like, frankly, the pressure that was exerted by the Tea Party, which was a relatively small group compared to what we're talking about here, their constituency was able to push the Republican Party to the right because there was this risk that if they didn't, they would get primaried.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, the Democratic Party has kind of tried to take steps to preserve, the established members of its own party so that they're not vulnerable to those kinds of pressures. But, I would say that's exactly what the country needs if we actually want any of the stuff that is massively popular to come to fruition.
So I want to go off on having young people involved, right? So, first of all, this generation, what have they seen, right? You're born into it and you have the Great Recession right away. You're thrown into a higher education system that saddles you with suffocating debt. So these folks are clearly responding. And we have a new poll out today that kind of shows that. So I want to dive into some polls here. I saw a comment earlier, I forgot who it was, so sorry about that, but they asked for just some polls, what's going on. So we actually have seen a really sharp uptick in polling ahead of this second debate for Bernie Sanders. A really strong sense that Bernie has the momentum going into this debate. A new poll out today from Emerson shows that Bernie, he got the largest bounce compared to their poll last month. He increased 5 points. He's at 20%. He's in second place. I actually think the most interesting thing in that poll is that Bernie Sanders' support with people 18 to 29, young voters, is double compared to the person next.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to talk about a candidate who is engaging with young voters, whether it's a live stream on Twitch with Top Surrogate, or if it's him going directly and inspiring them with a platform to cancel student debt, that is showing up in the poll. New Emerson poll, he's up 5 points, double the lead of anyone else when it comes to voters 18 to 39.
Just wait till we release that video with Cardi B.
Yeah, just wait for the Cardi B video. then it's really going to start going. And then another poll was released yesterday, the Hill-Harris X poll. It showed Bernie jump up 4 points, also to 20%, maintaining and actually expanding his second place lead. And that's something that, I think a lot of folks have been looking for after this last debate is, Bernie was in second place. What's this last debate going to be? Well, heading into this first debate, first night of the second debate, we've seen him actually have a sharp uptick, showing some momentum. Another poll from this week was Fox News. They showed Bernie in second place, gaining 2 points yet again. And interestingly, in this Fox News poll, Fox News knows one thing. It's Donald Trump and Donald Trump's voters. And this poll showed only one of two candidates polled against Donald Trump. One of them was Bernie Sanders, and he was winning.
Yeah.
We've got
Warren, Harris, not beating Trump at this point.
We've got some breaking news.
Oh.
First, I want to say, because we have breaking news, but first, what I want to say is we need your support. Bernie's going to be up on that stage tonight. He needs to know that you are behind him. Get us some money before he heads on to this debate. live.berniesanders.com. We need your donations, your contributions. We're trying to get to 1 million donors. So join right now at live.berniesanders.com. But here's the breaking news. We just got a press release from John Delaney's campaign.
Oh, yeah.
They just released the following statement, and I quote, "Senator Sanders' plan to turn our healthcare system into a socialist experiment isn't just bad policy, it's bad politics. It would all but guarantee that Donald Trump gets reelected." See, I guess your polls are wrong there, Bill. Senator Sanders isn't even a Democrat, and we shouldn't lead our party down a path that will mean we lose to Donald Trump. And he goes on to say that they have a plan for healthcare that will allow people, the private health insurance companies, to continue making huge profits.
If you think that's ridiculous, go ahead and give us $3.
Yeah, hell yeah. Okay, so
How do you respond?
My initial reaction to a statement from a former healthcare executive on Medicare for All is I don't care. I do not care what this guy has to say about Medicare for All. I mean, like, whatever.
What happens if you're a former healthcare executive? How do you take the pledge?
How can you know no longer take your money? Because he is actually self-funding a lot because he's worth nearly $250 million, and a lot of that money was profit that he made off of the healthcare industry.
It's a profitable business.
That's very interesting.
I want to address a comment as well from a member of the gamer community.
John Delaney?
That would help him raise some support, I think. But Doisa Chopper asks, when will Bernie support gamers to get the gamer vote? And I want to use this as another opportunity, of course, to plug the podcast, Hear the Burn. Very proud of it. Our episode before the last episode that was released today, I believe it was episode 16, is all about gamers. And we had Hassan Piker on the show, also Jim Sterling. It was I think our most popular episode yet because gamers really drove listen. So if you are a gamer who's here on Twitch watching and haven't listened to it yet, please tell your friends about it. Because I think the reason we did that episode was because Bernie did do a supportive tweet of the gamer community, and Jim Sterling talks a lot about kind of left politics within the gamer world and the extent to which a lot of these games are exploitative in a way that's kind of like a microcosm of what's happening in the world.
And to go back to that tweet, Bernie Sanders actually came out in support of the unionization efforts in the gaming community. And I don't think anybody else in the field has done that. That was unique to Bernie Sanders. These are, again, corporations that are making hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars in profits. And Bernie Sanders is standing with the workers to get a fair share of those profits.
From what I understand, you guys have been talking for the last 5 minutes, and I have no recollection because I am still thinking about this damn John Delaney statement. And I want to go back to this. Because I was thinking, oh, wait, hold on. He's saying it's bad politics. He's saying Medicare for all is bad politics.
He says we are going to lose to Donald Trump because we support Medicare for all.
Donald Trump, you mean the guy who ran on healthcare for everybody, right? He would say that at every rally?
Who said that single payer was actually a really good model.
I know I was just going over polling right before we got to that press release. There's some polling on Medicare for all. You won't believe it, Josh, but it's really, really popular.
Tell me, Bill.
It's really popular. We have seen nearly every time it is polled, a majority of people support it, well over 50%. I think even going back to last year, I remember a poll that had Medicare for all support in the 70s. And then, people will tell you, well, once you explain what it is, the polling numbers actually drop. In fact, what we saw pretty recently is that even when told Medicare for all means eliminating private for-profit health insurance, support among independents was still over 50%.
Which is the biggest voting group in America, to be clear.
I mean, and that's something that we don't see on TV a lot. It's like, oh, you have to, are you worried that you're going to lose voters on Medicare for all, or all these progressives is the party going too left? These are policies that people care about, that people love, and that people will turn out to support. So you know what? I reject this statement. I said it last time. I'll say it again.
Well, okay. I want to get to that, follow up to that point in 1 second, Bill. First, I want to say Joe Valentine says, tell people how to volunteer for Bernie's campaign. You can go to berniesanders.com right now. You can click on volunteer at the top of the page. Get involved in this campaign. It is incredibly important. The more people that we have tonight, we are actually making calls to people in Iowa and all over the country. We need your help to turn people out to vote, to get them involved in this political movement.
I also want to flag that the deadline for Students for Bernie Summer School is tomorrow. So you might have heard this on a Twitch stream from last week, but what it basically is an online course you can take where there are 6 videos, 1 hour long each. 4 of them you watch live, 2 of them you watch later, or at your discretion. And what you get afterward is a certificate that basically teaches you, in the course of the classes, it teaches you how to organize for Bernie on your campuses, strategies to use, language to use when you're calling people, cold calling people. And the real get at the end of it is that you get a swag pack full of a lot of really good stuff.
Damn.
Obviously the benefit of supporting a movement that saves millions of lives, but also t-shirts and buttons and things like that. So sign up at find Google Students for Bernie Summer School, and again, remember the deadline for that is tomorrow, so you don't want to miss out.
Definitely sign up. I actually was talking to Yang Jung today about it. She was on the live stream last week talking about Bernie's organizing summer school. Right now, we are at well over 1,000 applications.
Wow.
415 schools have students signed up to join the summer school, the organizing summer school. We're not even at the deadline yet. You still have another day to sign up. And so far, what I really like, when we were kind of diving into it, the Bernie Organizing Summer School, you have people over 130 applying at community colleges. You have over 165 from high schools. So if you are young, if you are a student, high school, college, community college, wherever you are at, and you want to help support someone who's going to fundamentally change the system and cancel all student debt, I might add, join. Yeah, sign up for Bernie's Organizing Summer School.
Do it right now. You got 8 minutes until the debate starts. There's plenty of time to go online, Google. What were we Googling again, Brianna? What were we searching for? It's Bernie Summer School.
It's BernieSanders.com/summer school.
There you go. BernieSanders.com/summer school. It's right there up on the screen. And we want to hear. We got 8 more minutes left before Bernie walks on stage. I've heard from people who are with him. He's very loose. He's ready to go.
All right.
Which is always when you get the best Bernie. And we want to hear. What do you want to hear from him tonight? What are you expecting? You know, a lot of the punditry over the last few days has been about Bernie versus Elizabeth Warren. What are they going to do? Are they going to take each other on? And, you know, they have been friends for a very long time, and they're fighting for many of the same things at the end of the day. I think we're going to hear Bernie lay out his vision for this country and where we go. But the pundits cannot get over this fight between the two of them. It's not going to be a fight between the two of them. They're really good friends.
Yeah.
And we got to get past this and actually have a conversation about how to change this country.
Yeah. In fact, I was traveling with Senator Sanders to Detroit last week for the NAACP conference, and I was standing in line. I hadn't seen the senator yet. I had gotten there to, we arrived separately, and I heard, a woman came up and stood right next to me and said, "Hi, it's so nice to meet you." And I was like, "Oh, great. Senator must be behind me." And I swivel around, and it's actually Senator Warren, who I'd been standing in front of in line for I don't know how long. So I was like, "Hi, Senator. It's nice to see you again." And then shortly thereafter, I spied Bernie across the room, so I go over there to stand with my camp. And very shortly after that, Senator Warren follows me across the room and pulls Bernie Sanders aside, and they have a little chat in line where they're huddled over, genuinely friendly with each other, and obviously much more interested in talking to each other than any of the camp of aides that were haranguing them. So yeah, it's a really ridiculous narrative, and I think it really hides a lot of the important distinctions, frankly, with a lot of the other candidates that are worth bearing out. Because a world where we have a debate with a smaller cohort on that stage, where we can actually substantively unpack the difference between Sanders and Warren is a world that's much better for the American people. So let's.
I have another thing that one person's looking to hear today.
Yeah.
This is Taylor Halpern. He says, "I want to see Bernie bring climate action and the need for a Green New Deal into the conversation tonight, since it's unlikely that CNN will."
Yeah. So the first debate, it took over an hour and a half to get to climate. Luckily we're going to have a climate forum in September, but I'm not going to wait till September to hear about climate change. I mean, this is something that is a crisis that we literally are running out of time to confront and do something about. So that's actually one of the top things I want to hear about. I want to hear about Medicare for all tonight, but I really want to hear about climate change. We'd love to know what folks want to hear about, because we have 5 minutes until this debate. Climate change has got to be top of the list.
There's 5 more minutes to sign up, volunteer, get involved in the political process. We need you to be a part of this campaign, and we want you to You have to have Bernie's back tonight.
Yes.
Randomly Amazed asks, "Is the swag bag made in China?" LOL. No, sir. All
union made in the United States
is Union American made.
And all the more reason to sign up at BernieSanders.com/summer school.
Chicken of Flight asks when Bernie's going to stream Civilization 5. If he's meeting up with Cardi B in nail salons, I really don't think you can write anything off. So you just got to keep tuning in.
Not the game that I'd push for.
Really? What would you push for?
I'm not going to say anything, but I'll let the Twitch commenters figure it out amongst themselves.
Mongalito says, "Majority Report live on Twitch for the debate." No, we won't have Sam Cedar live on Twitch for the debate, but we do have him on this week's podcast that dropped this morning.
So
please tune in.
Plug.
The podcast, I genuinely think the podcast is amazing.
It's really
and if you read the reviews on on iTunes, I don't think I've ever seen such consistently glowing reviews about people who say things like, I didn't think I needed to listen to something like this because I was a fan of Bernie Sanders anyway, but it actually helps me explain the movement to people who might not already be on board. Moms love it. I send it to my friends who it's really not the kind of propaganda that you might expect. We really try to do a deeper dive into issues that don't get, that rather get short thrift on the mainstream media. So please tune in. What can I say?
This is a good question from Richard Billingsley. He said, I want to see what your plan for infrastructure will be. That actually wasn't a conversation at all, I think, in the last debate. I don't think there was any conversation about infrastructure.
No, but given that they're in Detroit and Flint, Michigan is just a hop, skip, and a jump, I would like to think that there is some conversation about it because there's something like 3,000 cities like Flint in America today.
That's unbelievable. And Nina and Danny Glover actually were there earlier this week, meeting with people in Flint many of whom still don't have clean water. Not to mention, just to bring it back to the consistency angle, Bernie Sanders, the reason that we are talking about a $1 trillion, $2 trillion infrastructure package is because Bernie Sanders pushed that relentlessly in 2015 and 2016. It was not where the party was. It wasn't where the country was, but it's now Donald Trump's position as well. It's critical that we have a massive infrastructure program. This country is desperately in need of it, and I hope that is something that comes up in this debate.
So we are 2 minutes away from the first night of the second Democratic debate. I think we spent a lot of time tonight talking about Medicare for all, talking about climate change, not enough, hopefully we hear more, talking about Bernie's consistency and his record, talking about what it takes to build a grassroots movement. Before we head out, we have really 1 minute to do this here. Is there anything in particular that you really want to see when we turn on our TV to CNN in 1 minute?
I want to see the candidates who aren't Bernie Sanders finally own what they're actually selling to the American people. We saw people raising their hands in agreement with things to make a big kind of show last time around and then immediately leave stage and revise their positions. I'm not interested in any of that. I'm not interested in people who continue to try to ape and hold on to the coattails of Bernie Sanders because they know that he's made something politically popular. And I think that going forward, if people still try to play that game and lie so blatantly, they deserve to get called out, and I don't want to hear any nonsense about how that's an unfair attack.
Josh, good luck.
Wow, that's
Brianna nailed it.
That's hard to follow. But what I want to hear from Bernie is how he's going to change this country. I've heard a lot of the plans. I've heard a lot of the different policies that people have on that stage. But what I want to hear from Bernie is for him to say, the only way you can change this country, the only way we get the change that is required to address the crises that we face, is if we have the guts to take on the most powerful special interest in this country, and we have the ability to build a movement of working class people to take them on. I would love to hear that because I don't think there's anybody else up on that stage who delivers that message in the same way that he does.
Well, let's go watch it now then.
All right. Thanks a lot. We'll be back right after the debate around 10 p.m. Tune in, have fun, and remember, live.berniesanders.com. Donate, help us out.